Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. We're really looking forward to this webinar. So I suppose we can get started, jump right into it. So we're going to be talking about how to boost performance and reduce risk with Netlify Enterprise today. But just before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping. All participants are in listen-only mode, so you're muted. This session will be recorded. It is being recorded. We will send out recordings after. So I want to repeat that again. The session is being recorded. We're going to send it out after. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. So please queue up your questions, shoot them over whenever they come to mind. So in the bottom of your Zoom, you'll see a Q&A section. You can add them in there. And then please respect our community code of conduct. In summary, be nice, respect everybody. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. One, we are going to talk about how to ensure uptime, even under high or unpredictable traffic loads. We're also going to talk about the impact that the high-performance edge network has on core web vitals and what that means for SEO and conversion rates for your sites, stores, and apps. We're going to talk about how the high performance build on the enterprise plan can help get your web projects to market much faster. And then how Netlify solutions engineers, like we have Chris today, can consult teams to architect and execute solutions to complex problems for large teams. These are things that Chris and other solutions engineers on the Netlify team deal with on a daily basis and are some of the experts in the world of these things. Very quick introduction, then I'll pass it off to Chris and Martha. My name is Mike Chirokas. I'm a product marketing manager here at Netlify. And I'll let Chris introduce yourself and also Martha.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm Chris Hannaby. I just noted our names aren't on these slides. So I'm Chris Hannaby, second person on this slide. And yeah, I'm a solutions engineer here at Netlify. So I'm really kind of a technical point of contact for teams that are trying to evaluate the Netlify platform. And then I work with customers once they've onboarded and kind of help them architect their sites. We'll talk a bit more about what my team does later. I've worked as a web developer in the past, so I'm very familiar with kind of web development technologies and all different frameworks. And yeah, I also have Martha with me as well, who's an account executive. Martha, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Good morning, everyone. Name's Martha Mackmiller, and I'm an account executive here at Netlify, and so talk with both new and existing customers, on their different projects, and kind of am the internal person for helping, with any resources or things like that.
Great. So yeah, we're going to get straight into it and talk about these different topics that Mike introduced. So first thing we're going to look at is all about uptime. Like how do you ensure that your sites on Netlify stay up? What are the things that we give you to kind of manage that? And just kind of like before we look at the Netlify side, just wanted to talk a bit about, what does this look like on a more traditional stack, right? So if you were working with a monolithic stack like Ruby on Rails or traditional WordPress or Drupal, the scaling of that stack to handle spikes in traffic is always really, really challenging, right? So you have all these different pieces, you kind of being able to scale those horizontally can be really challenging. So you often end up kind of like vertically scaling out to larger and larger machines. If you do want to horizontally scale, you have to start thinking about load balances. There's all these different pieces to manage. And the kind of Jamstack approach or the decoupled approach that we take at Netlify is just kind of like by design much easier to scale and manage, right? So we heavily make use of our CDN edge network that is just really, really easy to scale, has presence all around the world. And so a lot of those things that are kind of difficult in the monolithic world just completely go away. Just looking at kind of like one level up, if you kind of have moved on from the monolith, maybe you started looking at something like Kubernetes or some other container-based deployment strategy. And those can be much more scalable, right? They have the right primitives to make it possible to scale, but it can be really, really challenging to manage that and have all of the, then you have to worry about deploying those pieces. And so we see a lot of teams come to us that have these really complicated CI/CD pipelines where their teams spend most of their time working on those things or fixing them or updating things, and they get basically no time to actually work on product development or features or whatever. So even with these kind of tools that can scale, can still be really difficult to just use those things and get them deployed. And yeah, how does Netlify help with this problem? Like I said, the architecture that kind of this decoupled approach uses is inherently scalable. So by design, it's much more scalable. But then the important question is uptime, right? And that's where some of our enterprise products can come in. So on the enterprise plan, we have a high-performance edge network that your team can use. And this, it scales to support any level of traffic, as said here. And this is completely different infrastructure to the network you might have used on the self-service plan. So this is built out across multiple different cloud providers. We mainly use AWS and Google Cloud as the kind of the providers for this. So there's redundancy across those providers. It has a huge number of points of presence around the world, like much more than the standard network. And so that means there's kind of that redundancy in all of these different nodes that are going to serve your site. It has this Anycast load balancer, which is kind of the first point of entry into the network. And that is significantly more redundant and reliable than the traditional network, the standard network that you get on self-serve. And on this network, our SRE team is really working with your team to ensure that your sites stay up, right? So our SRE team is doing proactive DDoS mitigation. They're working with you to make sure that the site stays up. So if your site was attacked, we're going to do everything we can to kind of route traffic appropriately that it has minimal impact on other customers, but with the kind of aim of keeping your site up and running as well, which is different to the standard network. The standard network, the terms of service allow us to take your site down if it's having an adverse impact on the rest of the network. So completely different approach to how we treat uptime and reliability. This is the network that comes with that 99.99, the 4 nines uptime SLA. So that allows something like 1 hour of downtime in a year before we've breached that SLA. So it's incredibly reliable network. So yeah, this is something that we kind of see, like any team that's doing something that's mission critical, production applications that are key for revenue, or they're key for marketing or brand recognition. We strongly recommend that teams consider this network and should be deploying sites on this network. And then kind of the other piece of this as well is, the benefit of the Netlify approach is you get that scalability, but you don't have to think about all those CI/CD things that I was just talking about, right? So we manage that whole pipeline. So you get the scalability while also having this super simple development workflow, things like rollbacks, all of the kind of nice benefits of just the Netlify workflow that you should be familiar with if you've used our self-service plans. And then I'm going to hand over to Martha to just talk about a case study of a customer that's really made good use of this network.
Yeah, definitely. So GEMINI is a great example, and they actually kind of came to Netlify to kind of create a learning management system for their user conference. And so once they kind of saw the benefits and kind of ease of use with Netlify, their marketing team, because they were growing, really wanted to simplify the build and deploy process. And so they had some really cumbersome processes, managing WordPress and AWS. So they actually came to us for high performance build to kind of empower their development team. And then again, like Chris said, High Performance Edge provided, that uptime piece as well. And then, kind of through re-platforming with Netlify, now their marketing teams and content teams can make changes, update the site extremely frequently without having to rely on the development team as well.
Fantastic, thanks, Martha. So yeah, there's also kind of some other impacts that the high performance edge can have, and that's on performance, right? So it's a much faster network than the standard edge, and that can have really big impact on some of the things we're listing here on this slide, right? So core web vitals, which have an impact on SEO, potentially conversion rate if we're dealing with kind of an e-commerce sort of site. And yeah, so looking at the first of these, Core Web Vitals are kind of fairly recent way that Google has changed how they measure performance and kind of user experience of your website. So there's these 3 key metrics: largest contentful paint, which is kind of a measure of like how quickly the page renders, first input delay, which is a measure of kind of how quickly the page becomes interactive, and then cumulative layout shift, which is a measure of kind of how stable a page is, do elements move around. And these different metrics now have an impact on the ranking of your site within Google's search algorithms. So there's potentially big SEO benefits to improving these metrics. And then the other side of this coin as well is that making a faster site is good for your users, and they reward you by buying more things, right? Like, it massively improves conversion. So you see some numbers on the slide here, maybe as much as an 8 or a 10% lift in conversion just from a 0.1 second improvement in speed for a mobile site. So there's huge benefits to just marginally increasing the speed of your site. And so the question is, how can the high performance edge help with this? And like I said, it's because it's a much faster network. And there's a couple of things that go into that. One of the main things is just having more global points of presence. So there's 70 plus points of presence around the world. They're spread pretty evenly around everywhere, right, to give very good coverage of where your users might be. And so that means that anyone who's trying to request your site, it's much more likely that they connect to a node that's pretty close to them. And so that immediately is going to improve, the response time. The round trip to talk to the CDN is much shorter if they talk to a closer node. And yeah, that's a much larger number of points of presence than the standard network. And the other piece is we have much better cache hit ratio on the high performance network because it's kind of over provisioned. It's designed to be as performant as possible rather than be affordable for us to run. And so that cache hit ratio means it's much more likely that a piece of content is served directly from that CDN node rather than having to be fetched from an origin server. And so those two things together can mean that you get kind of a 30 to 50% improvement in time to first byte, which is really the kind of core metric that we control in terms of your site performance. And that just kind of trickles down then into, that will have an impact on largest contentful paint and other metrics that make up some of these things. And so, yeah, without you doing anything, you typically will see this improvement in site performance that can boost those conversions, improve your ranking in search engines. And Martha's going to talk a little bit about like the economic impact of that.
Yeah, definitely. And so this is an example of a Forrester total economic impact study, and it shows some really interesting benefits around labor savings, developer efficiency, and then increased profit from site conversion. And it really shows how Netlify can, transform an organization and deliver value to teams in providing 151% ROI over 3 years. And so it really just shows how much Netlify can really, impact teams. And then I'll talk a little bit about Mackmillan. And so they're Chris, if you want to go to the next slide, sorry. And so Mackmillan, their sites on average are loading 8 times faster than before they adopted, Netlify. And so the improved site speed has had real effects on Mackmillan's bottom line. And so basically without making any UX changes, they've seen a 25% increase in clicks to retailers, which results in better conversion rates. And then they've also experienced SEO improvements with a 29% increase in SEO traffic, and then also 50% decrease in bounce rate, and then also increased time on their site. So some really exciting, statistics to share about, real results that Mackmillan saw.
Awesome, thanks, Martha. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about another one of the enterprise products, which is our high performance build. And kind of how does this help the productivity of your developers? So when we're dealing with this kind of architecture, a decoupled site, we're usually using some kind of static site generator, whether it's Next or Gatsby or Nuxt, 11T. There's so many different choices there. But the majority of these will have a build process, right, where the pages are kind of rendered and kind of we bring in all the content ahead of time before it gets pushed out to the CDN. And so the time that build process takes is essentially the delay between us triggering a change to the site and it being live for users, right? So this build time is essentially how long does it take to push out an update to the site. And as teams kind of, typically when you get started, if you have a smaller site, it can be, you're building things in minutes or maybe even seconds, right? And it's not a huge problem. But as you go deeper and deeper into using this architecture for more of your sites, or your sites start to grow as you kind of, you build up more and more content on your sites, you can start to see that build time sort of creep up, right? And so there's two elements to this. There's the time it takes to build an individual site, which you kind of see on the left, right? Like some screenshots from the Netlify team that we have. Build times, can be kind of getting up to 10. Some teams we might see 20, 30 minutes, right, for very large content heavy sites. And so that can start to be, a kind of an impact on developer productivity because it takes a while to see the result of a build. It also just limits, content team might want to be able to push stuff out faster. Then the other side of this is that as your team grows and as you have more and more sites that you're building, you can start to run into kind of builds queuing up, right? Because we only provide so much concurrency where you can run multiple builds at once on the kind of starter tiers. And so you might end up with all these things in the queue. And so each site has to build and take its time to build, but it's also the other things are waiting behind it, right? So that all starts to mean that it takes longer and longer to push stuff out. And so, like I said, the product that kind of helps with this particular issue is our high performance builds. And again, this is kind of completely different infrastructure to the self-service tier. Again, it has an uptime SLA. So if, being able to build the site is really critical to you, then you get that through the high performance build network. But really the key things are that you get significantly more processing power. So you go up to 10 virtual CPUs and 36 gigabytes of memory, and that's guaranteed for every build. So you get kind of a complete container that is yours for each of your builds. And that's like 5 times more than you get on the standard network or on standard build machines. And the other big piece is you get a significantly more concurrency. So you have by default 12 concurrent builds, but you can add more if you need that. And we'll kind of look at why does, what impact does that have? First, let's look at just, that increase in compute power. What does that mean, right? So this is a kind of screenshot from a pilot we did with a potential enterprise customer. I think now an actual enterprise customer, where we're looking at their builds within their team over a period of time, and we can see the point where we turned on HP builds to kind of pilot that with the customer. And in this case, it was something like a 40 to 50% decrease in build time. So going from around 8+ minutes to a little bit over 4 minutes for an average build. And yeah, that had a huge impact for their team, just in terms of, productivity of the developers, being able to push this stuff out more quickly to their users as well. Teams that are building very frequently, that extra 4 minutes can add up to a huge amount of time over the course of a day. So this was a huge impact to this team, and this is a really typical sort of result that we'll see is somewhere close to halving the time it takes to build a site. And then another example from a different team, this team kind of would build a big batch of sites all at once, right? So they had about 100 sites they were building on a scheduled basis to push out a big update of there was something that had to update on a daily basis across this large property of sites. And for them, this concurrency issue was a big thing, right? Because while this block of sites was building, they couldn't push out any other critical changes, right? So if other people wanted to push something live, they were kind of stuck waiting behind this big block of sites. And this team, the combination of decreasing the time it took to build an individual site, also with the increased concurrency, so more builds could run at once, saw this block of sites going from taking 36 minutes to build all the way down to just 9 minutes to build, which was 75% decrease. And so that just, again, like had a huge impact on the team's productivity and kind of the end customer experience as well, that these things just, dramatically sped up. And Martha's going to take us through a case study of one of our biggest builders on the Netlify platform.
Definitely, yeah. So excited to talk about Spring. So they're essentially a platform where someone can go to create a custom e-commerce storefront. Excuse me. Whenever they came to us, they had about 1 million stores, and they've actually scaled up to 10 million unique storefronts. And so they really needed a web platform that was flexible and supported rapid scale, just because of the 10 million storefronts and millions of daily users. And so, working with Netlify, they decreased their deploys from 90 minutes down to 1 minute. And today they have about 70 developers on Netlify. So really like a good story of, larger teams building very, very frequently and at scale.
Awesome. Okay, let's talk about kind of our last point that we want to discuss today. And this is kind of like, as an enterprise customer, you get access to my team, the solution engineering team. And so, we just want to talk a little bit about how do we help your team? What is the role that we play? Why is that something that's valuable to you? And I think really one of the biggest things is that we have all of these fantastic customers that are using Netlify, right? These huge teams shipping really, really important products using Netlify as the basis of that. And this is just a small selection of some of our big customers. And as a solution engineering team, we're working closely with all of these different accounts, right? And they all have unique problems, right? They all have their own tech stack. They're doing things in slightly different ways, but there's a huge amount that's kind of shared across these different teams in terms of goals and things that they're trying to achieve. And so as a solution engineering team, we start to see those best practices, what worked well for Twilio is maybe going to be something that's useful for your team, or whatever customer is kind of in your segment. We've probably seen someone go through the challenges you're facing as a development team. And yeah, one of the big things we do is try and share that expertise and that knowledge across the different teams we work with. And there's kind of, I'd say these are some of the main areas that we tend to be helping people with. So always a big one is site performance. Like we said, HP Edge can have huge impact on site performance, but there's also a lot you can do within your code and how you use your site generator, how you load different assets that can really optimize that stuff even further. And we typically are helping teams with that and giving them advice on how to really make the most of our CDN, but also all of the things they're doing in their code. And then again, optimizing builds. HP Build is going to help, but then there's always some stuff you can do in terms of how you build, what are you doing in your build process that can really impact that as well. So the combination of the high performance products, but also the expertise from the solution engineering team really helps teams, absolutely optimize this stuff, make it as fast as possible, help them achieve their goals. And then there's all kind of stuff that's more about kind of architecture and how should we do stuff, right? So a really common question is, what's the right way to approach internationalization? There's lots of different ways to do that in a decoupled way. And our team can help you find what's right based on the workflows you need. Things like integration architecture, like there's all these other services you might be using. Maybe you're talking to a headless CMS like Contentful. Maybe you're talking to a payments processor like Stripe, or an e-commerce platform like Shopify. There's all of these pieces, and teams often have a lot of questions about what's the right place to talk to those other systems. How do they bring that data in? How do they keep things consistent? Something our team was always helping with. And then migration is another big thing, right? Like if you're taking an existing site and you want to bring it across to a platform like Netlify, what's the right way to do that? How do you do that in a way that is effective? It doesn't slow your team down. And actually, that's what I'm going to talk about next, right? Like to dig in a little bit deeper about some of the work we do, right? This migration piece is a really common topic. And we would really work with your team to figure out what's the right way to do that. But, for example, this is a really common approach, right? Netlify has this really powerful redirects and rewrites engine that allows you to really incrementally migrate. So you don't have to do a huge big bang, rewrite everything and deploy it in one go. You can start with as little as a single page on Netlify and proxy everything back to your existing infrastructure and just really slowly move across, build confidence in the new approach. But yeah, this is something we would help your team evaluate and figure out what's the right approach. Another really good example, like I said, is internationalization. There's just so many ways to approach this. There's some of the frameworks give you really good tools to manage it within a single site. We actually see it's pretty common that much larger teams, they need to start thinking about splitting this out and using a similar approach to the incremental migration that we talked about, where they maybe proxy between different sites, but they kind of build out separate internationalized sites. And that has benefits around the workflow that the content editors can use and the translation team can use. There's loads of things to consider here. And my team, have seen all the different approaches. We can try and guide you on what's the right one for you. We've written blog posts about what are some of the options. We really want to kind of help you. It's a really tricky thing to get right. And you kind of have to figure it out up front, like what's going to be the right approach. And we can help you with that. And then a kind of more recent thing that we've been working with a lot of teams, Netlify just released our Edge Functions product, which is super exciting. So this allows you to run small pieces of code, right at the edge. So before content is served, you can transform requests, you can redirect people, all these things that you can do. Definitely go and check out the materials about this launch that was last week. And yeah, my team has been working with a lot of our biggest customers to figure out how can they make the use of this new product, right? This is an exciting thing that's been added into the platform. Enterprise customers, get a ton of edge functions, invocations that they can use. What's the right way for your team to use them? And so yeah, figuring out how this can help our biggest teams personalize sites or do localization or do various different things that previously maybe had a lot of performance impact. You had to do them client side, or you had to server side render if you wanted to achieve those things. Edge functions give you all these options to do those things in this really performant way. And we've been helping a lot of teams with that. And then I just want to talk a little bit about like, how does our team work with, if you are a potential enterprise customer, how do you engage with the solution engineering team? And the first step is always kind of like helping you, guiding your team through the evaluation of, is an enterprise license the right thing for your team? So we tend to do very guided pilots where we really help you figure out, what are the criteria that means this is going to make sense for you, and then help you kind of test out those features, see if you get the benefits, really kind of work through, evaluating that, helping your team out with some of these things we just talked about, right? Like architectural stuff as part of that pilot. And then we figure out, does it make sense, right? Like, is this going to be right for your team? Are you going to get the benefits that make it worth it? And then, like I said, we kind of stay with you after that point, right? So after you've decided that this is something you want to do and you're going to go ahead with an enterprise plan, we continue to work with you. So, you get a dedicated account manager. Your solutions engineer continues to work with you, helps you migrate. If you're bringing a new property to Netlify, we help you with that migration. We make sure that, you can switch over to Netlify with zero downtime from your existing infrastructure. But then we continue to check in and whatever cadence is right for your team, depending on, are you really actively developing a new project, or are you just kind of in the maintenance mode? We'll have regular calls where we kind of sync on what's going on in the Netlify world. What are the ways that we can help your team? So yeah, it's a really thing we're really proud of, is kind of our engagement as a solution engineering team, but also our support team as well. If you kind of have more critical issues, our support team are fantastic. And as an enterprise customer, you get access to them. And they really are kind of, staffed with some of the leading experts in this space, and are incredibly valuable asset to all the teams that are working with us. And then, Martha is going to take us through another case study that kind of talks about some examples of how this has played out in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And MANSCAPED is a great example. And so they came to Netlify whenever they were experiencing explosive growth here in the US. And then they had plans to basically expand, into the EU. So as they were looking at that, they realized that, as they were looking to internationalize, that their development process was extremely slow, extremely cumbersome. And they had 6,000 reviews at the time. I think they're up to like 15,000 now per product. And so that really slowed down the loading of their site, influenced, SEO and also conversion rates. And so our solutions engineering team kind of worked with them to kind of bring it down to one repo to manage the international sites. And then also implemented a high-performance edge to kind of get those reviews to load a lot faster. And that resulted in better core web vitals, and then also a lot of resiliency to traffic spikes from influencer campaigns and advertising. And then also their marketing team can ship changes quickly without having to rely on developers. So really strong example here of how our solutions engineering team can work with you. And then I will pass it over to Mike to kick off the Q&A.
Awesome. Can y'all hear me? Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris and Martha. That was that was really, really great to hear. We have a couple questions from the audience, and then maybe a few more. But anybody who's listening right now, please feel free to add in any more questions that you have. We've got some time and some great resources here, so might as well get your questions answered. First question, my business is just me. Can I still get Netlify Enterprise to get its features, or is this only for large organizations?
Yeah, I can take that one. It's a really good question. It's a pretty common question we get, right? It's like, I don't feel very enterprisey. Is enterprise right? If you're a solo developer or just a team of a couple of people. And yeah, absolutely. We have teams of kind of all sizes, right? So we do have solo developers or small teams that use enterprise because they want those benefits, right? They want the SLA or they want the performance, whatever it is. There may be all kinds of reasons that enterprise is right for you. And absolutely, we see those small teams use and get a lot of benefit out of Netlify. Equally, we have huge teams, right? Like it goes all the way up to hundreds and hundreds of developers that are all working within a single Netlify team. And it really can, a lot of options for scaling it as you grow. So yeah, I think enterprise can make it sound like you need to be Goldman Sachs or some huge organization, right? S&P 500 organization, and that's absolutely not the case. It's really about, do you have the needs of those enterprise products, and are they going to give you the benefits that kind of make it give you good ROI, right? Then enterprise, that can absolutely make sense for a solo team.
Totally, yeah. And another question we got from the audience, perhaps Martha or Chris, or I can also help. Netlify does not list pricing for the enterprise on our main site. Can we give some insight into why that is, and kind of maybe talk about how we customize tailor plans, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. I can take that one. So typically, our enterprise at a baseline, typically starts at around $3,000 per month. But what we really try to do is just work with your team to understand what the project is, what your requirements are, and kind of build a custom plan. And oftentimes what teams do is they'll start out with like just HP Edge or just HP Build, and then kind of as their team grows, kind of add on additional products, kind of working with the solutions engineering team and then also account management. So it's really, building something that's custom for you, and then we can adjust, as your needs change in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And anybody else, please feel free to add some questions. I think got one question here. Do we support self-hosted Git repositories or anything along those lines?
I'm not on mute. Absolutely, yeah. So we support the self-hosted versions of, I believe, all the major kind of Git providers. So GitLab, GitHub. We just recently added really great support for Azure DevOps. And so, yeah, we have a lot of teams that's quite common, like a more enterprise team maybe has a self-hosted instance of those things, and 100% we can support those.
Cool, awesome. Maybe one more question, perhaps for Martha. This is a question we sometimes get from larger enterprises. If they have a committed spend on AWS in the marketplace or something along those lines, is that something that they can use for Netlify?
Yeah, definitely. We do have a lot of customers that, have committed spend with AWS. And so kind of going through the marketplace, we have, you can definitely use the committed spend. And then we have kind of a streamlined approval process from a compliance perspective. So if there's any, SOC 2, type 2, pen tests or things like that, it really kind of helps to speed things up. So, it's a lot easier from a procurement perspective for sure.
Awesome. I think that's all we got for questions currently. Anything that comes top of mind that we haven't already answered, Chris or Martha?
Nothing from my side. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I don't have any. Oops, my bad. Yeah, I don't have anything else right now. If there's no other questions from people here.
I guess the last question I have, if you could go to the next slide, Chris, is how can folks get in contact with us? So I would say you can reach out to us. If you're on your mobile phone, feel free to pull out your phone and scan the QR code. It should bring you to the contact page. We'd be happy to chat, talk about your specific use case, maybe walk through some very specific questions or anything deeper with you. Absolutely happy to talk to you about that. So I think that's all we got for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. It's been a blast. Thanks so much, Chris and Martha.
Thanks, everyone.